Hello. That's how every video call that rings out in Michael Ardan's office begins when he opens his laptop and the world bends obediently toward him. That morning in New York, the sky was the color of icy steel, and inside was a silence that could be heard like the ticking of expensive watches. He was about to sign a deal that would transform his company from a maker of smart prosthetics to an American legend. Insurers agreed to a national reimbursement program. Veterans would get hands that obey their thoughts. Investors would get stocks that fly into space. Michael tapped his finger on the touchpad and a notification came. Subpoena, United States versus Ardan Biomedical Incorporated. Then another, from the blood-seeking channels. Leak. Internal emails prove clinical data falsification. He laughed nervously, like a man who first shoos away a mosquito and then realizes that this sky is darkening with a swarm. Is this a joke? He asked into the void, turning on the news. The screen showed a familiar logo, his own face frozen in a photograph he hated. Too cold, too rich, too confident. The man America loved or hated depending on the price of a barrel and the mood on Twitter. The phone vibrated. A text message from Lana, his younger sister and CFO. Michael, we need to talk. Now. Another was a video from an unknown number. He pressed. Tom Blake, the former co-founder, appeared on the screen, the one with whom he had slept under the tables of an old garage in San Jose, stealing Wi-Fi and believing that metal and code could save body and honor. Tom said quietly, I'm sorry. I sold part of the story. They offered salvation. I signed with your key. The sound cut off. The office suddenly seemed like a set for someone else's movie. Michael stepped back to the window, the city below bubbling like a pot of boiling milk about to spill over the edge. He felt like he was touching the cold glass with his forehead, but he was actually touching his own doubts. How many times had he pressed yes when he should have pressed verify? How many times had he put ethics aside because we'll be the first, because the world is waiting? The door opened, and Lana burst in, pale, her hair disheveled and panicked. The SSE is here. And the media. And, oh my God, Michael, someone leaked our raw files. They look like we've been faking the data. He felt a chasm open in his chest, like an elevator without cables. It can't be, he thought. What if it could be? His mother's voice, recorded on a tape recorder many years ago, the only memory he had from the hospital ward, whispered faintly in his head. Son, when the world speaks against you, tell the truth, even if you're afraid of it. He pressed play on Tom's video again, but the screen remained black. And in that black pause, a crack was born through which coldness entered his life. The end of the act is the calm before the storm, in which fear breathes. The storm was not late. By evening, a line of cameras, microphones, and people had formed under the penthouse, shouting the same word, scam. Investors refused to call. The senator from Ohio, with whom they had talked yesterday about benefits for prosthetics, today indignantly snapped his finger at the podium. Didn't it happen that the blue dream of Silicon Valley turned into a mud of fraud? The lawyers spoke in voices that could say, we do not recognize, we do not confirm. It is too early to comment. At night, Michael looked at the x-rays of the patients. A boy learning to catch a ball again. A veteran who could tie his shoelaces again. These are not fictions, he repeated to himself. Our hands are real. But the emails that surfaced painted a different picture. Changed dates, rewritten control groups, signatures that looked like his electronic key. Did you sign those patches? Lana whispered in the dark office. Your keys are under the test lock. No, he replied, and heard what sounded like an apology. No, I gave the green light to the pilots, but not to the lies. Someone is playing with my name. Meanwhile, enemies appeared like mushrooms after the rain. Tom had gone into the shadows, but his lawyer had already commented. The former CEO gave an interview on our toxic cult of results. The government blocked some contracts. Charities turned away as if he suddenly smelled death. That wasn't the worst part. The worst news came from his father, whom they hadn't spoken to in years. A brief, give me back my last name, sent to an old address, and a scan of a letter from a law firm. Deprivation of inheritance rights, until circumstances that dishonor the name are clarified. America loves myths, but it loves shooting them even more. When the agents came with a warrant, Michael didn't resist. They took away servers, laptops, a phone, and even his body felt like screws were being unscrewed. On the stairs, he met Kirsten, a reporter who had once crushed another legend. She bowed her head and whispered, "Ardan, when empires fall, there's always a scumbag who helps gravity. Look for him nearby." At night, he sat on the floor of an empty office, looking out the window, where the neon flickered like a Morse from another planet. Lana sank down beside him, and two thin blades of fatigue leaked from her eyes. "They're cleaning you up, Mike. Systematically. I got a call from the insurance commission. Someone brought in the full logs, where you're flipping switches like crazy. If it's true, we're done for. If it's a lie, we're defenseless. And what if this isn't just revenge?" He exhaled. "What if the galaxy is not what it seems, and my hands touched something they shouldn't have?" The morning headline was the answer. Ardan Biomedical suspends operations. Founder leaves CEO position. Lana signed. Without him, he read it 3 times. The ice beneath his feet cracked completely. And what had been a career, a reputation, a government project yesterday, today had become a desert in which only one could hear one's own heartbeat. The end of the act is a profound loss. The title, the company, the trust of the sister. When you are left without tools, you are left with hearing. Michael went to Brooklyn to the small prosthetics workshop he had started with before penthouses and presentations in Davos. The door was opened by an old Mexican named Rafa, hands in grease, eyes that saw more than cameras. "They say you fell, Chico," he chuckled. "But when you fall, it's better to hear the ground. Sit down." They drank their coffee, black as sin, in silence. Rafa took an old recorder and a USB key wrapped in blue tape from a drawer. "You took 2 talented years from me when you went to the clouds. I got angry, and then I saw your boys in wheelchairs playing basketball again. I'm not a hero, but this is real. And here it is. This is for you." On the recorder was Tom's voice, a longer version of the same broken video. He spoke of an offshore testing ground where insurance giants were shown perfect numbers, of a senatorial advisor who had suggested that we either speed up validation or get lost in committees for years, of the sale of a cryptographic key, his key, through a family person. Michael felt Rafa's words next door stirring up dust in the most painful place in his memory. Brother Roy, the accountant for his father's charitable foundation, the fight over a school grant, the years of silence. Family. That night, Kirsten found him in a cheap motel. "You don't want an interview. You want war," she said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "Give me access to everything you have, and I'll give you what you don't have, a map. I can read their shadows." And they began to dig. Vote slips and checks, letters written, "If I were Michael." Fake clinics where patients had names from the phone book. A strange endpoint that mirrored the company's servers to the private cloud of the Pro-Humanitas Foundation, which was linked to the same senator. "It's not just you," Kirsten whispered as the laptop's light illuminated a graph of transfers linking the insurance corporation, the state committee, and her father's charitable umbrella. "It's a speed up or die cult. They sped up, stole your signature, and threw you under the train when the track sparked." "And the prince?" he asked. "There's one. Someone who had access to your keys and wouldn't have drawn attention. You trust someone without looking. Family." He was driving to his father's house in Jersey, and the same thing kept ringing in his ears all the way. His mother on the tape recorder, his mother who had died so young that her voice was the only thing that could not be denied. The truth is always about who you are willing to become after her. Roy stood on the porch, wearing a cheap coat, with the face of a man who had been playing a role for so long that he had forgotten the real text. "We are family," he said when Michael handed him the USB. "You were always the sun, and I was the shadow. And then one day the shadow accepted the offer of light, but it wasn't your light." Michael sat on the steps. There was no rage brewing in him, only the cold knowledge that the map was complete now. Kirsten sent the last puzzle, the testimony of the foundation technician who had set up the endpoint. From that moment on, the world was no longer a mystery. "They'll crucify you in Congress," the lawyer warned. "If you take this out, there's no going back. Not for the business, not for the family." "There are places you shouldn't go back to," Michael replied. "And there are places you should go first." He offered the Justice Department a deal. Full access to the industry's inner workings, names, transactions, server images in Rafa's workshop vault, Tom's audio recordings, in exchange for open hearings and protection for the engineering team and patients. He was told he was out of his mind. In this country, it's easier to forgive theft than to force the curtain to be lifted. He agreed to the hearing. The Senate chamber was icy and theatrical. The cameras caught every sweaty glint on his forehead. The senator from Ohio tried to speak like the heroes of black and white movies. "Mr. Ardan, do you admit?" "I admit that I was blind," Michael interrupted. "Blind to the cult of speed that I myself promoted. I admit that I entrusted keys to people who did not have them. And I admit that the truth is more valuable than any startup." He pressed play on his iPad. A log appeared on the screen, a chain of payments, a letter from the senator's advisor demanding speed up. Then, an episode with an endpoint. After that, an audio confession from Tom. "I signed with your key," echoed under the dome. He did not hide behind legal formulas. He spoke of a boy with a ball and a veteran with laces. That technology is a sword, not magic, and if you do not control the hand that holds it, the sword will always find someone to wound. He also mentioned Roy, without naming him, but giving the coordinates of the truth. After the meeting in the hallway, he and his brother met eyes. "I'm sorry," Roy whispered, holding the phone that was probably already melting into evidence. "I choose not to forgive you," Michael replied. "I choose to stop lying." Kirsten stood behind him, like a shadow that finally took shape. "You won't escape revenge," she said quietly. "Everyone loses in this game." "Maybe," he said, "but someone has to lose, right?" When the first arrests were made outside, a fund technician, an advisor, an insurance contractor, Michael received a final offer. An anonymous consortium offered a peaceful deal, rolling everything back, in exchange for which he would return as CEO. The company would admit mistakes without naming names. He closed his eyes and saw his mother's. "The truth is about who you are willing to become after it." He pressed reject. The climax is all or nothing. He gives up his career and family peace for the naked, dangerous truth. A year later, he was living in a brick-walled apartment above a tire shop in Queens. In the mornings, the smell of rubber mixed with the smell of coffee, and in the evenings, as you walked through the neighborhood, you could hear the windows talking to each other. The company, under new management, was slowly returning its permits. Lana was free, but with a new face that knew the price of a signature. Roy was a state witness, in a protection program, somewhere far beyond their last name. The industry had changed as much as America had allowed it to change. Additional checks, ethics oaths, beautiful brochures. The gravity of money had not disappeared. It had only reminded him that even stars fall according to the law. Michael came to the Veterans Clinic every week. He didn't speak. He didn't give interviews. He just sat in the hallway and listened to the world click prosthetics, learning to tie their laces. Kirsten sometimes brought him articles by other people, about other fallen men and those who had risen. They sat on the steps and shared pizza from a cardboard box. "Do you think," she asked, "is it possible to be rich and honest?" He smiled at the corner of his mouth. "Honestly, you can be rich sometimes. It's not about money. It's about what you're willing to lose when they choose you." He wrote a short manifesto for young engineers. Don't confuse speed with honesty. Speed is music. Honesty is a metronome. Without a metronome, music becomes noise. The manifesto spread across campuses, and someone called it the new morality of old dreams. He just shrugged. Morals are not new. They either are or they aren't. One evening, a guy in camouflage approached him. On his left hand was their prosthesis, slightly scratched like old vinyl. "Mr. Ardan," he said, "when I tied my own shoelaces, I was back to myself. No matter what anyone said about you, thank you." Michael nodded and felt that ancient abyss subside in his chest. "I'm not a hero," he replied. "I've just learned to play the game properly." As night fell over the city, the sky looked as if it had been sprinkled with metal shavings, stars and drones, satellites and dreams. The message beyond the stars, he thought, is simple. Truth does not bring back what was lost, but it allows you to start over. And so the dilemmas he left to the world sounded dull but clear, like the beats of a metronome. Can you be rich and honest? What is more important, truth or success? Can you redeem the past if you pay with yourself? He didn't know if America would respond the way he would today. He only knew that the next morning he would go back to the clinic, where scarred boys would learn to tie their shoelaces, and the metronome in his chest would beat out a tempo where money didn't dictate the music. The finale was open. The answers were not once and for all, but every morning, like a choice to be endured. The end of the act is a great revelation. The key to the betrayal lies in the family, and the conspiracy is broader than his name.